Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Session is shaping the future of product development through evidence-based decision making by Joyce. Kind of introduce himself. There'll be time for questions, I believe, at the end and possibly during. And we'll bring around the mic to whoever wants to question. Also, after this, we'll have another session at 2 o'clock, so we'll try to give you a chance to get to another room or stay here.
Perfect. Share my screen here. Going. And then Mike, just to confirm. I have them. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Joyce, and today I'm going to be talking to you about developing products with an evidence-based decision-making set. So there's two reasons why I chose this subject. I've actually been on a speaker circuit for a book that I came out with called Bridging Intention to Impact.
Can you hear him? Is the mic on or is it?
You have to take a little bit better. I think it's a minute.
There we go. That sounds even better. All right. Good. All right, let's run this back.
Start again.
Do over. Cool. So again, hello everybody. I don't remember verbatim what I said, so we're gonna just kick things off. I'm here to talk about building products with evidence-based decision making. Two main reasons. One of them is I wrote a book called Bridging Intention to Impact. That is going to be the core focus of this. We're going to talk about something I call the user outcome connection. And I believe that that is a philosophy that can be used to align teams to want to use evidence when they are building out products. I've taken that philosophy at Microsoft, where I was for a while. I left. I did it at a few startups. Some of them include Twilio, Tonal, and Betterup. And then I came back to Microsoft because now they're building this great product called Copilot. I can't talk about the work explicitly at Microsoft that I'm doing, but I am in the AI space. Generally, when I give these talks, I will talk a lot about AI. Today, I'm really going to go deeper into the book because I've heard this group and the philosophy of Product Camp. I'm excited for this is that it is supposed to be interactive. It's supposed to be engaging. And so we're going to kick things off with some dialogue. And then throughout this presentation, I want you all to raise your hands if you have questions. Like, this is the book that it's been out for a couple months now. I've been talking on it for a little while. So if you have feedback, positive, negative, or whatever it might be, if you just have questions, I want to hear that. So I have a bunch of slides, and if everybody's quiet, we're going to go through all the slides. But if we want to have a dialogue about actually trying to use evidence in the product development cycle, let's also have that discussion. The one piece that was on the slide of the intro, but just to reiterate it, is I've spent the majority of my career as a researcher. I started my career in consulting, and then I left. I went and got a master's, and I pivoted into research. I have also built a couple of products, a couple of startups, none that you've ever heard of because none of them really exploded. But along the way, I have played the role of product, but in more of a startup capacity. I'm a researcher by trade, and I like research at big companies, especially at Microsoft, because I wind up actually caring more about the user needs and the user outcomes that we're trying to drive with whatever we're building in the researcher role, where the PM role really is like a business, more focused on the business, the customer, in the sense of the business admin or whoever that might be. So just a couple clerical things to kick things off. But we're going to get a little interactive. So I'm going to have everybody raise your hands. And then after each of these questions, thank you for following instruction. Listen, not everybody raise their hand. I will have people in this audience. I appreciate it. This is an interactive audience already. This is fun. So when the question appears on the screen, I will ask those of who agree with it to please raise their hands. So, and then we'll have a little bit of dialogue. So the first one is raise your hand if usage or growth is the main way that you define your product success. So this would be things like daily active usage, monthly active usage, growth metrics. Cool. This is less. I'm actually genuinely surprised by this. So a couple people are raising their hands. What are the main metrics that you're looking for with that?
Feature adoption in the app.
Okay. Feature adoption. Any others?
Use the microphone.
Apologies. Feature adoption in the app.
Okay, perfect. Can we do one more? Yeah, you're probably gonna have to run around a little bit if that's all right.
Yeah, make me run.
Ours would be dollars per customer location, software fees.
Say that again.
Dollars per customer location.
Dollars per customer location. Interesting. Okay, cool.
Increasing.
Yep, and there'd be a growth in that. Okay, that's great. Okay, so then if it isn't the main, if usage and growth is not the main way that you're defining product success, this will be interesting. Raise your hand if you incorporate usability metrics in that success definition. Okay, and how about more people raising your hands? Is that your main definition? No? Okay, cool. So then the next one here then is raise your hand if you measure specific behaviors changed by a feature. Okay, solid group again too. Can I get a couple people to explain what behaviors are actually measuring?
So I lead generative AI portfolio. Oh, thanks. I lead a generative AI portfolio. And so critical thinking is a capability broadly. So think about like inputs, prompt inputs, being able to have the population throughout the workforce being able to validate results, those types of things as far as human behaviors.
I love it. Yeah, that ties directly into what we're going to be talking about. Well, maybe one more person. If anybody wants to raise their hand? You'll get your chance.
We provide our users with a list of goals that we encourage them to adopt, and we try to influence them towards certain goals while still allowing them to choose freely among the broader list.
Okay, and what product do you work on?
It's I work at Rotary International, if people are familiar with Rotary clubs, and the website allows people to do a bunch of things related to managing their club.
Okay, interesting. That's great. Yeah, thank you. We'll do one more here, and this is the crux of what we're ultimately going to be talking about today is how many of you measure the user outcomes for your product? Okay,
Yeah, I know, want to.
we got about 25% confidence, 50%, 50-50, and 25% not. So for that one, I'm gonna have you do it again. A couple people, user outcomes that you measure, and please say the product that you work on too.
We have a accounts receivable product and a payment product. And so mostly we're looking for our clients' adoption or customer adoption of the product. So we're trying to see how many more customers are using our platform to pay or view invoices. I'd say that's probably the leading metric for our company.
And on that, before we jump to somebody else, that definition, that I think is a great user outcome that you're looking for. You really have a measurable outcome of this is going, if people use this, it's going to impact how they actually do business. For all of you that build product, do you feel you have that user outcome for whatever you are working on? Raise your hand if you confidently feel that, or actually just make this a really quantifiable. Raise your hand if you are working on a product right now. First of all, that I'm imagining most of everybody. Now keep your hand raised if you feel you have an outcome in mind, that's confident outcome. Okay, so we lost maybe between 40, 50%. Okay, cool. This is all great, useful information. It's also useful because this is ultimately some user research for me. So thank you all for participating. The problem we're going to be talking about today is that usage and usability metrics alone cannot guarantee success, that your product is actually achieving success. This is something that I have seen repetitively throughout my time in product. And the goal of this presentation is going to be to teach you the 4 components of the impact mindset. That is the core of the book that I previously referenced. It is the core of how I believe good product development occurs. This is not conflicting. I'm not saying that things like design thinking, jobs to be done, agile, whatever the types of frameworks and processes that you use, I'm not saying that those are invalid. I'm saying that what I will talk through through these four components is that there is an additional opportunity to look at specific behaviors, which right now from the straw poll we did there was about 10-20% of people. So we have a template here. Anybody who wants to, I will have this or I can share this again at the end. But if you want to check this out, generally I share this only if you purchase the book. For being great audience members, everybody can have an opportunity to do this. It's going to open in Google Docs. If you have Google Docs, you can just save it pretty easily. If you don't have Google Docs on your phone and you have an iPhone, you can save it through like sharing it. We've figured out a way. It's like you share it, you try to print it, you print it as a PDF. If you ultimately struggle to actually get a copy and you want one, at the end, I'll have my LinkedIn. Just reach out to me. I'll send it to you. I'm going to leave this up for a second. So again, we're going to go through four components of the impact mindset here. All of them are touched on in that sheet that you just saw. They're touched on through, and I'm going to touch on them through this presentation. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more about what it really means to build impactful products, at least to me. So when I think of building impactful products, I think of understanding customer needs. I think about finding the right solution for whatever problem that a customer has. And then I think about innovation. I think about actually creating some net new solution in the market. In reality, most products are built because of leadership and marketing pressure. And I always see a couple of people shake their head, and I felt that pressure too. And it is, especially in AI right now, everyone is feeling the pressure that there needs to be some sort of AI features on the product roadmap. The next is feature parity. The reality is a lot of products in the same market are pretty similar. It's a couple of unique features that really create each company's unique value proposition. So there's a reason to go out and copy a lot of the same structure, design, et cetera, of customers, of your other competitors. But you can't do that 100%. You need to figure out what is your unique niche. And so when it's an over focus on feature parity, it can lead to a loss of thinking about, well, what are we actually differentiating ourselves with? And the last piece is pure product intuition. Anybody with an iPhone, really any smartphone in their pocket, they are reaping the benefits of product intuition. Steve Jobs saw, even though there was no research that suggested that people would want a calculator, a phone, and a bunch of other devices in one device, that was an idea, that was intuition, that ultimately led to a great device. Quibi, for curious, you've been using this example. How many people know Quibi before I use the story? Okay, a couple people. So there's a reason why a lot of people haven't heard of it, but it is a great case study in a business disaster. Quibi was a product intuition. It was a group of content creators that thought we should build, if everybody likes TikTok so much, we should build 5 to 10 minute long episodes of TV shows. It sounded right. It extraordinarily failed. And I believe after like $1 billion investment, they had a bunch of content, never took off. Nobody has ever really heard of it. So pure product intuition alone is not enough to really to be certain that you're going to be driving user outcomes. So 3 challenges that I see that I've pretty much already talked about, but is that the over-reliance on usage as the primary product success metric. I see this commonly. It is the easiest metric to measure. And so it's the easiest metric to get into your dashboard, whether that be amplitude, mixed panel, Pendo. And then it just becomes, well, if we see people are using this, if we see it's growing, then it must be working. That's a false assumption. You don't know it's actually solving that user problem. The next is that most traditional ways to design features, again, those design thinkings, those jobs to be done, they end at the user outcome. They say, okay, you've figured out the problem that people are trying to solve, but it doesn't actually say, well, how do you design something to solve that problem, to actually change that person so that they are going to satisfy whatever their need is? And then the last one is that evidence is the way to make confident product investments, but then a lot of companies are afraid of actually experimentation. Optimizely came out with a great report that showed on their platform that it is an extraordinary long tail. It is about 20 companies that are running, and this is a rough estimate, I can't remember the exact metrics, but about 20 companies are running like 70, 80% of all of the Optimizely studies. These companies are running hundreds of tests a week. And then there's about 80% of companies that run them maybe once a week, once a month, and then a whole other long tail of companies that are doing just one test a year. So there's a very big hesitancy around experimentation, even though that's the way that you actually generate evidence. So the three truths that I'm going to talk about through there is pretty much just the opposite, is that since usage does not equate to it having its intended effect, you have to actually measure outcomes. You have to experiment to create evidence, and then building products that create a positive outcome ultimately mean you're changing that user's behavior so that they themselves are going to go and satisfy that outcome. And I do this through there's again, 4 components to how I see this being done. The first is the user outcome connection. As most of you looked at that already, so you probably have looked at the template, you have a pretty cursory understanding of it. We're going to talk a lot more about it in a second here. Once you've defined your feature with the user outcome connection, that is saying specific behaviors change user outcomes and ultimately create a business impact. That's what the user outcome connection is. The feature impact analysis is how you actually ensure that that is true. How you can say confidently, if our feature does change the behavior, if it does cause an individual to create more savings or to not dip into their emergency savings, that would be a behavior that's being changed, it will change the user outcome. It will yield them to have a greater emergency savings. And to really be able to use that, to be able to confidently say that, one needs to do experimentation. That's the feature impact analysis. All of that evidence goes into a central location to help people make decisions as they're developing products, the Insights Hub. And then in the end, that is the foundation for really making evidence-based decision making. Let's talk about the user outcome to start. User outcome connection is that specific behaviors, when changed, will create a user outcome that is then actually beneficial for the business. In fitness, one of the companies I worked for, Tonal, if you're familiar with it, it's like a Peloton for weight training. One of our goals there was to help people decrease weight and increase body image. Those were our user outcomes. The specific behaviors that we identified was that we could help them increase calories burned through the workouts that they engaged in and decrease calories consumed, which was really mostly out of scope for our product, but we were able to go and create integrations with other products to try to ultimately encourage those things. The whole reason we were building that product was that we believed and had research that suggested that if we did help people actually achieve those outcomes, that we would be able to retain them on our platform. In other words, keep their subscriptions. And then there would be organic marketing. People would say, this worked. And they would tell their friends, and it would lower our customer acquisition cost. Another example, which I pretty much already referenced, but is if you want to have a user outcome, if you're building some sort of app to help people create an emergency savings, your user outcome is increased emergency savings, which is also followed by an increased feeling of financial security. To get people to do that, you would need to build features that increase monthly contributions or decrease withdrawals. So hopefully you're beginning to see this pattern of if you end at the user outcome and you say, what we're doing here is we're trying to build an app to help people with emergency savings. Well, that's great. That is what you're trying to do, but how are you actually going to do that? And having this level of definition allows you to target what types of users, what types of behaviors you're actually trying to change with whatever subsequent features that you build. A couple other examples, just so I'm not using finance and fitness, very easily measurable outcomes. So I'd like to lead with those, but you can do this with any feature. One of the companies I worked with was a company called Segments, similar to mParticle. Hopefully some of you have heard of these companies. They create event level data. The specific behaviors here is increased integrations of ensuring that you're getting data coming from multiple sources. The more integrations to a data pipeline that one has, the more likely that they're going to have an increased data flow. They're going to have a centralized system of data, whether that be in a database or if it's just truly a data pipeline, they're going to have more data flow through that pipeline to whatever the downstream impact is. But to get someone to get to that outcome, you need to be thinking about, well, how do we build features to increase the level of integrations in that data pipeline? And then the last one, security training. I just recently was involved in a project around this, the user outcome was decreased security incidents. So this was everybody's thinking about security, especially after SolarWinds and all of these, the bigger hacks that have been happening. Well, how do you actually reduce security incidents? How do you make people feel more comfortable that they know what to do in the event of a security incident? Well, you think about the behaviors you can change, increased reporting of phishing attempts, further exploration of whatever security features they have. So overall, what I'm trying to say here is each one of you know your product spaces better. This framework is an attempt to try to allow a simple definition that you can use so that anybody that you share with what you're building will be able to easily understand not just what it's supposed to do, but exactly what you're targeting the user will change in their behavior. It gives an ability to create more alignment around what is actually being designed. It gives a space that is goes beyond just the outcomes, and it is really targeting the specific things that you are designing to be changed. Becomes more of a design question rather than a business decision. And then that allows all of the other stakeholder teams in the product team to be able to focus on what they do best. The researchers can go and really understand what behaviors are being changed. The designers can think about how do we create the right solution to change that behavior. The data scientists can think more about what data, how do we create the metrics around these specific behaviors, around these user outcomes, so they can truly understand if that feature is working. As a centralizing force of the product team, it empowers the product manager to be able to have, again, that aligning, centralizing definition of a feature. And then the last piece that ties into the next step of this impact mindset is that it organically creates a desire for evidence. As soon as you define each of these steps, now there's an opportunity to go out and create or find evidence that suggests that the feature is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, which leads to the feature impact analysis. And before we do that, I'm just curious, this fun interactive crowd, y'all have been good thus far. Does anybody want to give an attempt of doing one of the features they're working on through this? Anybody? Got a couple in the back?
So,
So I'm responsible for, it's interesting, it says security training, but for training new ways of working. And so I was trying to connect this with maybe a page where I have videos people can self-service to teach them how to use a tool. It's better, it doesn't need to be instructor led. It doesn't need to be that formal. It's hosted by the tool, and it's kind of their university. So the behavior that I would be seeking is that people are using these videos. So I want them to use that video, and the outcome is for them to understand how to use that tool, be able to use that tool without having to reach out to a support group. So that reduces sort of the burden on the administrators of the tool. The business outcome is this more, I would say probably increased efficiencies, just by nature of not having a bottleneck with one admin responding, but also then greater understanding and alignment. Everyone watches those same videos, and then they're using the tool most effectively, which then is helping them to know how to work differently and help kind of overall transformation.
Love it. So it'd be completion of video, maybe completion of series are the specific behaviors that you're driving. So what could you do to make that as captivating of a video? What features could you create to actually keep them on the platform? User outcome would be that they would have the ability to actually take action on the insight. So you would see that through more completion of whatever the video is teaching, whatever the training, the adoption of the tool. And then the business impact is there's less call center requests for that. So you're having less people, maybe less attention being paid by call center employees for resolving those types of issues. Awesome. That's great.
How often do you vary up? Because like you've got the arrows between behaviors to outcomes and outcomes to outcomes, or user to business outcomes. How often do you like jump around and like start with user outcomes and then try to find out what behaviors cause that, or start with the business outcomes and how do the user outcomes achieve that particular goal?
Great question. And I'm realizing in this is the first way I'm walking through this like this. And generally I start with user outcomes and then I build there. So I greatly appreciate that, because I did not appropriately introduce it, that I believe you start with user outcomes because that's what we're all used to actually building out, is that it is user outcomes are what design thinking yields, are what jobs to be done are. Those are all current definitions. And I'm saying design thinking and jobs to be done, assuming that most people here understand that. Quick, shake of heads or raise of hands. So that's where you likely already are building features with the desire to change some sort of user outcome. And then it's most, especially product people, will have a business outcome in mind too. Most companies will have some sort of, we believe that we're actually building this to drive this business outcome. It's really the specific behaviors that's the novel addition here. Thanks. Yeah.
Had a question to build on your framework here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Teresa Torres's work in continuous discovery habits. She outlines outcomes in two frameworks. One is the business outcome of like generally what is the business and like financial impact. And then the product outcome is more like that change in behavior for the user. And so if you are familiar, just kind of curious like how you see your framework similar or different to that, or if not, maybe it's the same thing, just different approach.
Yeah. You said Teresa what?
Torres,
No, yeah. What's her, does she write a book or is it
the
just?
continuous discovery habits.
Yeah.
It's quite
Great
awesome.
question. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I read a collection of books in writing this book. That was not one of them. And it's, maybe, intentionally avoided it or just overlooked it. So yeah, thank you. Cool. Did you pass the mic or anybody else there?
I guess follow-up question, just on the definition of user outcome and product outcome. Is there a gap there, how we should think about these, or are they kind of the same thing?
So this really, you can do it with a full product. I also think this is especially helpful at the feature level. So literally doing this definition for each feature, because that is where you can get that unique value proposition that why you believe, because think about Uber Eats, DoorDash, a lot of these companies are very similar in the delivery space. It's just a couple of features that make them uniquely different and then a bunch of design. So if you look at it as a product, a lot of the companies in the market are going to have a similar user outcome. In a delivery service, it would be getting people to have satisfied food, getting food at a timely, getting food to people timely, a couple of things like that. You look at the behaviors, it'd be like probably increasing diversity of food, increasing the likelihood that somebody chooses exactly what they want, something like that. And then the business outcome would be people continue this platform. But if you get into the specific details of, and I'm trying to think, I led with that example, but I don't have an example of a specific feature in one of the apps. I guess actually I do, just because I was ordering food last night. And it was DoorDash had like food that can be to your apartment in 30 minutes. And it's specific price, all in, fees and everything. So that I've never seen on a platform except for DoorDash. If you look at that specific feature through this lens, now you have a way to design, okay, like that behavior is that the behavior is to actually try to get people to choose something in that moment that they're going to complete the purchase with the outcome being that I'm satisfied that I chose DoorDash because I got food and it was within my budget. I think that looking at that feature level, you're again more apt to be able to hand that idea, what am I trying to build here, to a designer, to a researcher, to whoever, to say, how exactly can we craft a feature here that is going to provide the value we're hoping to differentiate ourselves?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I actually just want to expand on what you said about Uber and all of the features. I was a market analyst there a few years ago, and it's crazy what you can see in a user's profile down to the longitude and latitude of when they signed up for their Uber account. So often we were given certain accounts to really take a deep dive into and to analyze how long they had opened the app, what they had been ordering, just, certain habits to market those certain features, like things that could be to you in less than 30 minutes. So I always think it's so interesting how you can take that data and then build out those marketing strategies from there.
Interesting. Yeah. And that I think is, and you said you were a market analyst.
Yes.
So I'm jumping ahead, and if we have this great dialogue, there probably won't even be time to get to those slides, but I think what you're calling out, and so we'll probably want to get to it. So I'm just going to use this example to say, Another reason why I think this is such a powerful framework is that a lot of the times the data, and we're going to transition just to this slide. So this is why I have found this to be a way to align teams around how to define their features, is that when you define these three categories, you now have three inherent assumptions that can only be answered with some sort of evidence. If not, it goes back to that pure product intuition. It is the belief that if we do something, we will actually change that behavior. And so to your point, you had great market analytics there that the product team that was working on those delivery features may or may not have had. Whereas you were beginning to have data that could fill, in your case, I think it would be the user outcome assumption, saying that there were specific behaviors that you could see that users were doing that would satisfy some sort of outcome. And so I think the power of the power of naturally defining a feature this way is that you will be able to go and find data first that will validate these assumptions before you have to go and actually experiment. You can go, it gives the product manager or the product team an opportunity to reach out to the sales team. Do you have data that says that customers are requesting this and will pay for it? That is an opportunity right there to go and begin to design something in that space. It's something we naturally already do. This again is just an aligning function around it. So there was one more question there. If it's still, yeah.
This is at the feature level. I'm curious about how a set of features being for example, could be that it's a series of in-app messages or even on your phone. That could be different data copy.
I think there's a great question in there, but I didn't fully hear it. So can you say it one more time?
So, oh,
Okay, it wasn't just me. I was like,
okay. So
That's better.
if this is at the feature level, very helpful to be able to have this framework and walk through that. But it's oftentimes a series of features that come together that could remind the user that you should complete your order basket and so on. So I'm curious about how you untangle features that could be even purposefully meant to work together in order to drive a specific outcome, in order to get to that business outcome.
That's a great question. And organically, I did that. So at the data pipeline company that I referenced, I did that we had it at a feature suite level and at the individual feature level. So there is an opportunity just to have those definitions and be able to connect to make sure that all of the features underneath it connect into whatever that feature suite goal is. So one or two. So generally, I say you shouldn't have more than 2 user outcomes per definition. You really want to try to only have one, and then build multiple versions of this same, because you want to make sure these behaviors actually change the outcome. And that's not always true for multiple outcomes. So to give I'm not going to jump back slides, but let me give you a targeted answer. I would say that is where it's a flexible framework where I think it's best used at the feature level, but that you can roll it up all the way to the product level. And so it can have that aligning function where then that when you're building features at that specific level, that it can roll up to whatever that is. So yeah, that's the best answer I can give right now. That is a great question though. Thank you. Let me take a pulse. From where we were going with the talk track to now this interaction, where are we at? Do you want to see more of this, or is this helpful for everybody here? We're all choosing to sit in this session, so I want to make sure we're getting some value out of this. Cool. I'm seeing smiles, so thanks for the pulse. I like this format, so this is fun. It's a little bit like a lecture with
product people. So, okay.
I think to answer a little bit of your question and expand on what you said, I think that's why beta is so important before you do the rollout, just to see what's working and what's not working. And these pipelines are long. These are like you're working on these for not just months, sometimes not even a year, but for a very, very long time. You don't even get to see sometimes the outcome, and knowing when to walk away is also very important because we've stayed on projects that we just knew that, it really wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to be successful, but you are giving it your all and you keep trying. So, I think just that beta period, you get a really good grasp of what is going to work and what isn't before you get to the point of rolling it out fully nationally. And you're like, okay, this isn't giving us that user outcome.
I think that's actually a great segue. I'm going to comment on this slide too, because I think what you're saying there is what gives the power behind this, defining it with those, is because now you have 3 new metrics with this. Actually not the slide that it was, it's this one, is that the most product analytics softwares are going to give you this by nature. They're going to give you usage growth, et cetera. That's why I started the presentation there. More product analytics software. I was just at Pandemonium last week. Penda was investing so much in more usability metrics. They have the basic surveys that you can deploy in product, single ease of use question, the satisfaction ratings, NPS, all of those. Again, these are becoming more like how well a user actually interacts with that feature. But still, neither of these actually tell you. People might use something. I mean, how many of us have used a product for a little while and then after a couple months thought, oh, this actually isn't doing what I wanted it to do? That is what that's ultimately what a leaky bucket is that you're seeing people after sustained usage beginning to go, oh, this isn't actually what I wanted. And so I'm dropping off at some point. You don't know why when you're just measuring usage. You just know they're not using it anymore. Similarly, with usability, people might tell you they really like something, but again, it might not actually be doing anything for them. And so then their switching cost is really low. And so they're going to say, okay, this is fun to use, but hey, look, now there's this new app over here. I'm going to go try this out. And so usability, whilst both of these are good opportunities, they're good metrics to really understand what a person is doing with a product and how they feel about it. It really is only when you get to these 2 behavioral and the user outcomes that you can really begin to see, is it driving after satisfying whatever that person is actually trying to accomplish. So it's these new metrics that can become leading indicators for your product, whether it's in a beta or whether it's if you can't do a beta. I mean, it can even be before beta. So I'll start there. It could be in usability testing. It could be in some of these pilot studies that you do. With these additional metrics, even if they're not collected at scale, you can begin to start to get a pulse. Does it feel like it's doing something to get that person to actually change in the way that you're hoping to? Is it increasing, especially for those more subjective ones, like a couple of examples of making somebody feel more confident, of making somebody feel more financially secure? You can ask them, if this feature worked how we've just described it to you, would you feel more confident about your financial stability? Is it a perfect metric? Absolutely not. But does it begin to give you that leading indicator so you can pull the plug or you can drastically redesign the feature before you invest all the money in it? Absolutely. I think, yeah.
How would you translate this framework for physical product?
This is exclusively for digital products, unfortunately. I mean, you could, in theory, it shouldn't say it as dramatically as that. It can be done for physical, but I have only exclusively thought about it in it. I mean, I think that any type of, the reason I say it too is the behavioral outcomes you're generally collecting from data analytics software. It is going to be you're going to be getting that from whether it be a segment, an M particle, one of those event level data tools to be able to see how is the addition of this changing how people interact with my surface, my actual product. It's much harder to do that with a physical product because you would have to watch that person actually do it. So you could, in theory, do that. I guess it's a space, again, I'm not that familiar with, but you'd have to think about how do I watch this person actually change their behaviors from interacting with this product. Well, we have this lull. I want to just point out this one other piece because I want to get your all's feedback then on this. Is the whole point of the user outcome, again, is to create this natural demand for evidence. Now that you have this definition,
We've explored a lot of different avenues of how this could ultimately be helpful. This is the crux of how you go from just saying, I have defined a feature this way, to ultimately saying, now I believe we can confidently scale this feature because it is changing behaviors, it is yielding outcomes, and it is going to create a business impact. Is that you start with the definition, we've talked about this, we've talked about the validation. This is the piece of now we have those assumptions outlined. And so with those assumptions outlined, we now are going to go find the evidence first. That's hitting up your different partner teams to see what exists. You will naturally find, and you'll see in the template that I shared with you all, that there is an opportunity, there is a section of it that pretty much says, what level of fidelity of insight do we have? How confident are we that there actually is, when we change this behavior, it's going to yield that outcome, each of those assumptions. So anyway, step two is just going out and finding what information exists. And then from that point forward, you will go and create the rest of the metrics. So when I say create metrics, how many of you, and we'll do a raise of hands here, is how many of you feel comfortable in your roles that you know how to go out and create a brand new metric like a behavioral or a user outcome that we've been talking about? Okay, so about 10%, and then I saw a couple heads bobbing, 10, 20%. We'll say like about 25%.
By create the metric, like discover what that metric should be, or start collecting the data that gets you that metric.
There is that's a great split of, there is the functional definition side, and then there is the technical creation side. So I will re-ask the question because I think that's a great differentiation, is that we've talked right here of, I've given you a lot of different frameworks now, or we've talked about the user outcome connection and that 5 levels of metrics. So we have different ways to define metrics. How many of you would feel comfortable today? And this is what the template ultimately can be used for if you all choose to use that template that I shared. How many of you feel that you could go with your current feature and define a specific behavior and define a user outcome, not collect it, not actually go and be able to go and have it at a scalable way? But yeah, how many of you? Okay, so about 50%. Hopefully, I wish I would have asked in the beginning, and then I could see if this is how effective this was. Now on the technical side, barring any of those 5 levels of metrics that we previously saw, how many of you feel comfortable that working with whatever team, that could be your engineering, your data science, or whatever other team that you would use, feel that if you had an idea for a metric today, that you could go and actually get it created? Okay, it's about 50%. That's interesting. That's ultimately out of scope. That is truly more of an engineering and data science, but yeah, I appreciate it. Did that begin to address your question in the back? Yeah.
Yes, thank
awesome.
you.
Cool. So we got 5 more minutes. I'm gonna bring it all the way to the end. There's just one thing I wanted to hit on was, and I'm excited to hear to end on this to see your all's thoughts, is that, so the piece is, these frameworks are useful, hopefully, and they're supposed to be these guiding, they're useful for guiding people towards an aligned decision, the aligned definition of the feature. That's the ultimate aim. The reason that I have taken this approach of starting with the frameworks as a mechanism to get people talking about what exactly a feature is supposed to do is they're supposed to be the foundation of a cultural change. This is supposed to be the opportunity to encourage people to say, right now, most product people want to build something that works. That is, I think, I won't even straw poll us here. I'm going to assume that everybody here has some intention to build something that works. The reality is that we get into our daily grind, we get into all of those reasons why we build features. Again, pressure, parity, intuition, and then next thing you know, we're just building just to get something shipped. And so this gives an opportunity to start to question, well, why are we shipping this? Why do we believe this works? And so it can be that foundation of the cultural change. It can also encourage more experimentation. And the experimentation doesn't have to be A/B tests. It doesn't have to be these deep digital experiments. It can be usability testing. It can be just getting in front of 5 users and asking some questions. You have these metrics defined. And so now it's functionally defined, to be specific, that now you can start to ask people, how would it change through interaction? And so with that, it is beginning to create evidence. You yourself could start to do this if you just have access to a couple of customers. And so it can begin to position you as the catalyst of creating that evidence-based decision-making culture. So if you define the feature, you have people talking about this feature in a uniform way. Everyone understands we are going to build this feature or even build this feature suite or this product overall because we believe it's going to change these behaviors, satisfy these outcomes. And when we do that, it will ultimately have a positive business impact. That start then will create the need for evidence that you are beginning to create to satisfy yourself through usability testing or A/B testing if your company has that, however else. And ideally, that is the snowball effect. I've seen that happen in multiple of the companies that I've done this work with, that once you get people talking, they want to build something that works. So if you ask the question, well, why do we believe this actually works? People naturally are going to want to start to go and find that. So with that, we've got a couple more minutes. Again, if you like the template and it didn't work, you can follow me on, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I write about this stuff. I write about a lot of AI stuff too. So would love any feedback for this presentation or anything else that you see. Just feel free to reach out. Again, book is Bridging Intention to Impact. So if you like the template, the book is built around that template, and it's to help people walk through it. And then my company that I don't think I talked about in the beginning, but I do consulting on this. That's where I get a lot of these case studies. It's Desire.com Labs. So thank you all. This has been fun. I really actually enjoyed this. Is to write a book and then just kind of have this dynamic, like, where's everybody's minds going? This is a unique product camp thing. So this is great, but happy answering other questions.
Thank you.
Raffle tickets for raffling his book off during happy hour.
Thanks for the reminder.
Okay.
Hi. Yes, I think this is on. Can you talk a little bit more about experiments? I think that you mentioned something around how experiments actually help generate data, which leads to evidence. But experiments can be pretty pricey, especially in a very major sport, especially if there's a lot of politics and whatnot involved. So I'm curious about the ways that you've seen that work, where folks have come on board with more, let's have a hypothesis and let's run with it. So yeah, curious about that.
I think they can be pricey if you look at it from a systems perspective and you think, oh, we need to have an optimized account. Optimized is expensive, or we need to have a user testing account. Those are also expensive. So I think that if you look at it from the common trap when I'm talking about experimentation that I find people is that they think back to some academic class that they took that talked about like randomized control trials, statistical significance. That's where a lot of people's minds go. And yes, that's great. If you're going to make $1 billion investment, I would recommend that you take that approach and you invest a lot of money in that test to make sure you have the highest quality evidence. But if the decision is no evidence versus something, then that could be as simple as getting in front of 3 users and just asking them questions that at least now you have these functional metrics that you've defined that you can dig in to measure. And that can be done. I mean, if you have great customers that are open to doing it for free, it's literally just the time of the employees involved that is there. If you want to get a better sample, a better group of people, or maybe you reach out to the public and you say, hey, we'll pay you $50 for a half hour or something, then it's only a $150 study for 3 people. So when I say experimentation, the ideal is a scaled digital experiment, something that's being done with feature flighting. You're testing out 2 different versions. You're collecting all of these metrics. That is also expensive. It can be as simple as something that is free or just a couple $100s to just get some evidence. So you're making a decision with something rather than just intuition.
I was just going to kind of respond back on that because my company's gone through a lot of change and is only just becoming, I would say, almost like a design thinking, client-centric culture. Yes. And so experimentation is very new for us. We've found it just having wireframes dusted up and doing walkthroughs. I mean, they take 2 seconds. I can do them myself. I don't really even need a designer. They're so easy to do. We spend we'll even spend half an hour mocking a few screens up, get them in front of a client that same day, just find out from the sales teams who's meeting when, join a meeting. I think you just have to lower, like, it doesn't have to be perfect, just get the concept across and just be clear on what what the intention is of the test and where you're going. And then we've also had a lot of success in scaling experimentation with Helio, so we can kind of hit our target audience and do that, which is more expensive, but it does allow us to get much more data. And I'd just say, like, this, I can give you some reference materials, but generally also, like, to get a statistically significant indication of something that is kind of tested and true only usually takes about 5+ users. So I think that really helps lower the bar to kind of figuring that out.
Yeah, I would, and I may have misheard you there. I agree with everything you said. I think 5 users gets you a good direction.
Direction, yeah. To
Statistical
start.
significance,
Exactly.
significance,
Yeah.